The city of Charlotte back in the national spotlight as U.S. lawmakers push for bail reforms following last year's deadly light rail stabbing.
In August of 2025, you'll remember Irina Zaruska boarded the light rail in South Charlotte after work. Minutes into a ride, a man sitting behind her in a red hoodie, identified by police as Carlos Brown Jr., fatally stabbed the 23-year-old in what appears to be a random attack. Well, that attack gained international attention, with many blaming North Carolina law.
Today, a group of Carolina representatives introduced the Cashless Bill Reporting Act.
The group directly pointed to the case of Brown Jr. In January of last year, Brown was charged with misuse of the 911 system, a misdemeanor. During his arrest, Brown said he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. A local magistrate released him 2 days later on a written promise to appear, a common decision involving a nonviolent misdemeanor charge. Well, weeks before the stabbing, Brown was directed by the court to get a forensic evaluation, but that never happened.
Americans should be able to see which jurisdictions have enacted dangerous and irresponsible policies related to bail when making decisions about where to live, to work, or to travel.
Republican Mark Harris represents District 8, which includes parts of Union and Cabarrus counties. Harris, along with several other Carolina representatives, introduced the bill this afternoon.
It would require the Attorney General to publish a list of state and local governments that allow cashless bail and the charges tied to each incident. The list would include violent crimes that the AG deems a threat to public safety, along with public disorder offenses. The House voted to advance the legislation for debate.